What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Our show today, it is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2017, getting on toward the end of the month there. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. It's amazingly busy news days. A lot of stuff going on. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the top story of the day, there has been a terror attack in London at Parliament. Right now, apparently, the suspect collided with some pedestrians on Westminster Bridge, was driving to Parliament, tried to crash through the gate, attempted to, actually succeeded in stabbing one of the guards before he was shot. Right now they're saying they've got 4 dead, including the suspect, who is described in the media as an Asian gentleman, but the Sun has published photos of the suspect being treated for his gunshot wound, and he does not look Asian at all. He looks Middle Eastern to me, so either the Sun got the wrong photo or somebody is trying to say, oh no, it was an Asian person. You know, please don't get in the way of our moving the Middle Eastern people into Great Britain and so forth and so on here. Now, getting on back to the ongoing scandals of Obamagate and Trumpgate and the rest of it, pretty much at this point, everybody has come to the conclusion that this dog and pony show in the Congress on Monday was a big fail. It's being described as a big fizzle, because all they did was get on out there and say, well, we think there's got to be something going on here, and we're investigating. We haven't found anything, but, you know, just the fact that there's an investigation, we can't trust Trump. We should negate his authority, as it were, here. Interestingly enough, they're even carrying this over to Great Britain, and yesterday we were talking about these absurd comments coming out of the Democrats and Trump's enemies here, and apparently a former conservative member of Parliament, Louise Mensch, was on a BBC show, Andrew Neil's show, and she announced she was a temporary superpower, which makes you wonder what drugs she's on. Then she went on to claim that the founder of Breitbart had been killed by Russian agents, and then call for President Trump to be impeached for having links with Russia in the lead-up to the Russian election. So they're still out there pushing this stuff. I guess they're thinking if they just tell the lie often enough and loud enough and repeat it over and over and over and over again, that eventually your brain will relent and say, okay, Trump and the Russians were swapping wet, sloppy kisses, and liberals are good and conservatives are bad. Tom Fitton, from Judicial Watch. He's the president of Judicial Watch. He was on Breitbart News Daily and basically said that the liberals, Hillary's people, Obama, the FBI, are chasing this fantasy Democrat unicorn theory of the election. And what he is suggesting is that Hillary's supporters, the liberal establishment, the establishment as a whole, just cannot accept the fact that the American people did not want to vote for Hillary Clinton, and so they're desperate to find some other villain to explain away. They're solving their hurt feelings by saying, well, it was stolen from us. We didn't really lose. The American people love the liberal agenda. The American people love Hillary Clinton. Therefore, it has to have been a stolen election. It's that same convoluted logic where they still insist to this very day that Russia stole Crimea. Well, that's not, of course, what happened. The Crimean people had 2 referendums. Referendum 1, we're going to leave Ukraine because Kiev now has a U.S. Puppet junta that is not representative of our people. We're going to leave. Then they had a second referendum saying we're going to ask to merge with the Russian republics, and that's exactly what happened. And the rationale from the United States is they refuse to recognize the right of the Crimean people to have the referendums, even though such referendums are guaranteed by the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And even the UK Defense Minister, Sir Gerald Howarth, is out there saying what the Crimean people want is not the issue. Russia should respect Ukrainian borders. Now, this logic, to show you how ridiculous it is, this is like a guest at a wedding deciding that the bride did not have a right to marry this particular gentleman, therefore, by default, the groom has kidnapped and raped the bride. That's basically how ridiculous this logic is. But that's the default position right now. We refuse to recognize the will of the Crimean people, therefore, Russia has stolen Crimea. Now, the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute came on out and said, what are the Russians accused of doing? We know they didn't hack the elections. NSA and FBI are saying that they can't find any evidence. They didn't change any votes. They didn't hack the voting machines. They didn't go and switch the votes. All of the vote fraud that has been uncovered so far favored Hillary Clinton. What's going on here is that the Russians exposed the fact that Hillary Clinton cheated Bernie Sanders out of the nomination and tried to cheat Donald Trump. And that's why they're all in a lather here. You're supposed to believe that our elections are honest. Remember back in October, Obama said, our elections are impossible to rig. And then when Hillary lost, Jill Stein came out and said, we've got to have recounts because the election was rigged. And then when the recount failed, Hillary came on out and said, Russia's hacked our election. So Trump goes into office and says, we're going to investigate whether there was election fraud last year. And immediately everybody's saying, no, don't do that. The NAACP is out there saying, investigating the integrity of the election sends the wrong message. It's discriminatory. It's racist. It's anti-Semitic. Whatever thing they can put on out there. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Bob, are you there? There you go.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hi, Mike. I was reading Zero Hedge this morning, and we've entered La La Land. There was a reference to a tweet from our good friend Maxine Waters. It just said, get ready for impeachment. I don't know what that impeachment's based on. It's all just this fantasy fairy tale of the Trump-Russian connection.
Dianne Feinstein came out with a similar comment. You know, Trump is going to leave office. It's like, in their minds, it's a done deal.
Yeah, I mean, these people are so corrupt. They're so attached to their rich lifestyles. But there was another story about the warmongering, the family of warmongers, the Kagans, including Victoria Nuland, out with op-eds in the Washington Post, the New York Times, how there has to be a further involvement in Syria. There has to be, the Republicans have to acknowledge the connection between Trump and Russia. You know what? I think Trump would be well served just to confirm that there's nothing out there. He should get on Air Force One and fly to Moscow. That would be a poke in the eye to these people. To these liberals and these globalists, that there's nothing there. I'm so confident there's nothing there. I'm going to meet with Vladimir Putin because global peace can't wait. We can't wait for this story just to die down, because it's never going to die down. He should go to Moscow or meet Putin in a neutral place, Iceland, Finland, and sit down and talk peace. Talk peace and coordinate action in Syria against the real enemies, ISIS. And he should also fire Comey, because I don't agree with your analogy about the Saturday Night Massacre. I think that was at the tail end of Watergate. I think Comey has admitted there's nothing there yet, but there's an ongoing investigation. He should just fire Comey.
I would like to see Comey gone. I think it was one of Trump's really big, dangerously naive mistakes to keep Comey on his head of the FBI. But I still think right now the timing would be awkward. Certainly the corporate media would seize on it, and even if it's not a valid parallel, they would liken it to the firing of Archibald Cox by Richard Nixon. Remember, these people are operating outside any rules of ethics, morality, truth. They're even advertising the fact we're in a post-truth society. What actually happens is irrelevant versus what we can make you believe. And they're out there still trying to reassert their ability to convince you that black is white, up is down, left is white. There really is a Santa Claus, and Hillary Clinton would have won the election if it wasn't for the evil Russians.
what do you think about my idea of him meeting Putin?
Well, I think sooner or later they're going to have to meet each other. I know they've been having phone calls and everything, but I don't know it would defuse the situation. In fact, I would expect the corporate media to say, see, he's cozying up with Vladimir Putin. He went to actually meet him. Who knows what they discussed in private? And, you know, I mean, there is, I mean, Donald Trump could walk on water, and the headlines would read, Donald Trump can't swim. Donald Trump could cure cancer tomorrow, and the corporate media would come on out denouncing him for putting all of these cancer treatment doctors out of business. There is nothing Donald Trump can do that is not going to be turned to the worst possible interpretation by that corporate media.
Very true. Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a while. Mark in North Carolina, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's going on, Mike? Mike, I don't know if you know the whole story about this crazy woman. I think she's a member of the British Parliament or something.
She's former member. Former member.
Okay. Anyway, what she said is that Putin had Andrew Breitbart murdered because Putin wanted what's his name? Bannon. He wanted Steve Bannon to take over the Breitbart website at the time, and I guess I don't think it was a radio show at the time. I think it was just her website, and that's why.
Frankly, if I'd been that host, the instant she said she was a temporary superpower, I would have called for a drug test right there on the air.
Yeah, and they call our side conspiracy theorists. They say we're wearing that tinfoil hat. You know, I mean, come on.
Well, see, here's what's going on. Here's what's going on. When, you know, a government can lie to its people only for so long, and then the credibility starts to crumble. And all they can think of doing is making the lies more outrageous and more extreme. Remember what Adolf Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf. He wrote a warning against the big lie tactic. And he warned that Germany's enemies were going to be just making more and more outrageous and extreme claims so that the shock value of the claim would bypass your normal skepticism. Oh, it's so horrible, it must be true. And that's where we're getting here right now, where they're trying to, just to keep relevant, just to keep in the media, just to keep in the public eye, the lies are getting more and more extreme, and all they're really doing is accelerating their own loss of credibility.
Well, you know, it was Goebbels who said, tell a lie enough times and people will believe it. The thing is, at the time, they didn't have the internet.
That's exactly right.
All kinds of different sources.
Goebbels is obsolete. We've made Goebbels obsolete.
By the way, I don't know if you know this, too. They've also come out, that guy, Devin Nunes, he said he got proof now that they were actually spying on Trump and his people. So...
yeah, there's a lot of that out there. I mean, all the way back to 2004, before Trump even, even if, I'm sorry, I got a message here, and I'm trying to multitask here. Yeah, absolutely, it is getting crazy out there, and we are in La La Land. You're absolutely right. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go here. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm saying that Nunes got this document. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, well, again, we know that they were spying on Trump and his associates in his business at least back to 2004, long before he ever declared that he was going to run for president. And so if they're watching him just because he's a businessman, you know, at this point, they are watching everybody. They don't want you to know it, but that denial, you know, Clapper lied under oath before Congress following Edward Snowden. And all that other stuff that came on out. We know Comey lied on Monday when he was making all these. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's also now a fact that they were actually saying that both Infowars and Breitbart. By the way, Breitbart is mild compared to you guys, to you, Infowars, and they're more establishment than anything else. That they were actually. Being spied on because they were suspected of working for the Russians. I mean, this is
no, they were being spied on to find ways of constraining and controlling them, because even though Breitbart seems to be much more cozier with the establishment than other websites out here, they were still putting out very important stories. There's a lot of good stuff comes out of Breitbart to this very day. And that may have been the real motivation for Breitbart himself to die, as it were. And then the web work may be continuing. Apparently, Media Matters' David Brock had a heart attack today. He survived it. But, you know, it's just getting kind of weird. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines, get back to the news. We got so much stuff to get through here. Apparently, they are now claiming there were 2 attackers at the Parliament. One of them is dead. The other one is still at large, and everybody's over there just trying to figure out what's going on here. Even Fox News is reporting on the House Intelligence Chairman Nunes is saying President Trump's communications may have been monitored. They're hedging it back. May have been monitored. Certainly they were here. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Over at the Washington Free Beacon, Adam Credo has reported the Department of Justice, which were sending their tech experts to the servers at Trump Tower over this alleged tie with Russia, found malware on Trump's servers that was spoofing the connection to the Russian servers. Now, gee, who would do a thing like that? And so that's what the Department of Justice has actually found. Somebody was trying to frame Trump with this whole Russia thing. Remember when they come on out and say, we found the fingerprints of Russia all over this? No, you didn't, because part of the revelations of WikiLeaks and the CIA is the CIA maintains a program called Umbrage that steals foreign malware for the CIA to use to break into people's computers and leave a false trail pointing somewhere else. So anytime somebody says we have absolute digital fingerprints that it's XYZ, no, you don't. You're looking at who you're supposed to blame for it, not who really did it. Now, let's go on back to Monday here, where Comey explained away the FBI's failure to have their technical experts examine the servers over at the DNC, because the DNC hired a company, CrowdStrike, who went on in and said, we have found evidence of Russia, and James Comey said, that's good enough for me. We don't need to send our own people over there. They're a highly respected private company. Actually, no, they are not, because now we're hearing all of these other companies that are in the industry coming out and saying, no, they're not competent. And in fact, they misread the available data. The International Institute for Strategic Studies reports CrowdStrike erroneously used IISS data as proof of the intrusion. Now, IISS has disavowed any connection to that CrowdStrike report. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense has also claimed the hacking never happened. And the challenges to CrowdStrike's credibility are significant because the firm was the first to link last year's hacks of Democratic Party computers to Russian actors, and because CrowdStrike co-founder Dmitry Alperovich had trumpeted his Ukraine report as more evidence of Russian election tampering. They're part of the cover-up. They're part of the deception. They found malware on Trump's computers to fake a connection to Russia. Now, there's another aspect to this. 5 congressional staffers are now undergoing a criminal probe. These are the IT workers who were caught committing unauthorized access within the Congress. And they were kept on even though it was known that they were basically going into places they were not allowed to go. One of them worked for the former DNC chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And so if you're looking for somebody who got that DNC email out there, that's your most obvious target if you dismiss the theory that Seth Rich did it, who was then shortly after the leak killed. So there's far more evidence there pointing to these IT workers in the Congress than there is to Russia. But the narrative will be Russia, Russia, Russia. We have to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, before I get to the next story here, I want to basically issue a caution. Over the last few days, we're starting to see a lot more junk, news, hoaxes, fakes being flooded onto the net. They're trying to basically jam up the communication so nobody's really sure about what's going on. Earlier today, I got flooded with 20 copies of a story that they were going to exhume Vince Foster's body on the basis of new evidence, and it was immediately apparent that the story was a hoax because Vince Foster isn't buried where they claimed, where the story said he was being exhumed from. So we need to be very, very careful. Now, that being said, I want to move on to this next story. This is from yournewswire.com. Take it with a grain of salt. Basically claiming the FBI's counterintelligence division is now investigating Google and Facebook for their cyber operations that helped Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012 and helped Hillary Clinton in 2016. Now, we all know that actually happened. Whether the FBI under Hillary's minion Comey is actually investigating is another matter entirely here. Now, again, it's on Fox News. Caller was out there saying the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee said the communications of Trump's transition officials, including President Trump himself, may have been monitored after the election as part of an incidental collection. In other words, they're trying to already spin this that, well, you know, we weren't spying on him just to, you know, get election information. You know, that was just a side effect. And yet, they don't have a crime. They don't have a crime. Now, as you know, Neil Gorsuch is undergoing his pounding before the confirmation hearings. And obviously, all the Democrats are against it. We don't want Trump's judge on the Supreme Court. We're going to fight hook, ladder, and sinker. And Ted Cruz, to his credit, stood up and reminded everybody that back when Neil Gorsuch was appointed to a federal judgeship, not a single Democrat, including Hillary and Obama, opposed him. So their attacks on Gorsuch today have nothing to do with Gorsuch himself and everything to do with having another gotcha against President Trump. It is amazing how childish these people are in these positions of power. Well, I guess when you have that much power and that much wealth, there's no real reason for you to grow up or develop any kind of maturity. You can go on behaving like children. But what kind of a message does that say to the next generation? I feel sorry for the young people of our country who are trying to learn how to be adults when our nation's leaders continue to behave like such spoiled children. Now, there's an issue that's coming up with the nominee for Secretary of Labor, Acosta. And it goes back to that Jeffrey Epstein episode where Jeff Epstein had a lot of underage girls, and he was basically looking at a lot of jail time, and everybody loved to go down to the island, which I think was stupid. If you're in politics or a position of power, and there's a guy out there saying, I have this little house in the Caribbean with lots of underage girls for you to play with, you'd have to be pretty stupid to go down there, because you got to understand, that house is going to have cameras, it's going to have microphones, and you're going to be blackmailed. So anyway, Epstein was accused of sexually abusing more than 40 underage girls between the ages of 13 and 17. And unfortunately, former Miami U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, whose confirmation hearings began this morning, made this deal with Epstein that kept him out of jail. It was basically a wrist slap. And now people are asking just why Trump appointed Acosta. I hope Trump wasn't stupid enough to walk into a honey trap blackmail operation, because I think anybody who went to Epstein's Island is being blackmailed by Epstein. I'm going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, down in New Zealand, there's been a little bit of a diplomatic kerfuffle. Apparently, one of the U.S. diplomats down there has been expelled from New Zealand. There was some kind of an incident. They're keeping a lid on it. and the government of New Zealand asked the embassy to waive this individual's diplomatic immunity for this police investigation. The embassy refused, and as a result, the police were unable to question him about what was going on. New Zealand has then PNG'd this particular diplomat, and it's all very hush-hush, except that New Zealand radio reported this man, who's still not named, when he left the country, he was seen with a broken nose and a black eye. So something's definitely going on over there. Over in France, boy, their corrupt politicians are dropping like flies here. French Interior Minister Bruno Le Roux has been forced to resign amid another nepotism scandal. Apparently, he hired his daughters to be his parliamentary assistants. So, a lot of corruption over there. Now then, let's get on to the media and this panic attack that the establishment is going through. And they're trying to bring back McCarthyism. They're trying to bring back censorship. They're trying to get around that pesky First Amendment right to freedom of speech. And apparently, over in California, and we already know they've gone nuts in that state, they're proposing a new law that will make it illegal for anybody in California to operate a website that makes controversial political statements to the public. Obviously, if Claire and I were still in Southern California, my website would be a target. But that's where California is going with this. And the language of the bill is misleading political statements, with, of course, California deciding what is misleading and what is not. It's government censorship of online content. Now, this is a clear violation of the First Amendment, but unfortunately our establishment doesn't feel that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights should be valid anymore. Certainly, given a choice between adhering to the Constitution and perpetuating their wealth and power, they're going to go for the perpetuating the wealth and power thing. And the heck with the Constitution, as George Bush said, it's just a blankety-blank piece of paper anyway. We can do whatever we want. We are gods incarnate. Now, one of the investigations that we are hearing about is supposedly the FBI is investigating InfoWars and a couple of other independent media outlets for connections to Russia. And apparently all it takes is you posting something from Russia Today and you are on that list. Remember the Washington Post when they came out with their list of websites that are arms of Russian propaganda, and it turned out their only rationale for claiming we were all stooges for Vladimir Putin was the fact that we had linked to articles in Russia Today. That was it. That was the entire case that they made, and the Washington Post was forced to back away from this and say, well, this is a list we got from these other people over here. But it is ludicrous what they're actually doing. I mean, I don't know about InfoWars. I think it's nonsense. I know that I'm not a stooge for Vladimir Putin. If I am, he owes me a lot of back pay at this point because I've never gotten a check. This is an attempt to smear us all, and exactly a repeat of what happened during the McCarthy era. That anybody who is not towing the line for the official story, oh, you must be a Russian stooge. You're a Russian agent, are you? We're not going to listen to you anymore because you're working with the Russians. According to another story out of IntelliHub, the FBI is also investigating websites that exposed Hillary Clinton. And classic case of trying to kill the messenger, because everything that was put out on the independent media during last year's election was usually cited from the corporate media to begin with, or official government reports. And the attitude is, we don't care if this is what Hillary really did. You erred in making it public. It's the same attitude we get from Israel. Israel wants to go on being apartheid, and they want to attack their neighbors. They want to have nuclear weapons, but you're not allowed to talk about it. That's the very definition of the post-truth society. It doesn't matter if what you're saying is the absolute truth. You're not allowed to say it. So, according to McClatchy News, the FBI is now looking at the independent media websites who put out things about Hillary Clinton that may have worked against her election. Well, in the days before the Internet, people would talk to each other about the candidates. And those who had compromising information would verbally share it. Didn't make them Russian stooges, didn't make them operatives. It's called political dialogue. And political dialogue is first and foremost what is protected by that First Amendment. The First Amendment isn't really there to cover exotic dancers or art canvases with bovine poo stuck to them. The First Amendment is so that we, the people, can share our honest opinions about the politicians back and forth without fear of retaliation. And we are seeing the establishment, the deep state, basically dropping what's left of the Bill of Rights in the shredder in their desperate attempt to hang on to power, wealth, and control. And it's really not working. Over at Blacklisted News, they have a wonderful article, Our Hopelessly Dysfunctional Democracy. And it says what we're all waking up and realizing. Democracy here in the United States has become a hollow shell. And basically saying if the citizenry cannot replace a dysfunctional government or limit their power, or limit the power of the financial aristocracy at the ballot box, the nation is a democracy in name only. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. We, the people, voted for Donald Trump last year. He won that election by the rules everybody agreed to play by, despite massive election fraud favoring Hillary Clinton. And they don't want to respect that. They're trying to get rid of Trump and put the establishment back in power, and that tells us we don't have a democracy anymore. We're living under a dictatorship. They want you to believe we have a democracy, believe our elections are honest. They had elections in the old Soviet Union. Didn't really change anything. As Stalin used to say, people who vote decide nothing. People who count the votes decide everything. The corporate media is still on attack mode regarding Donald Trump, and his new budget is coming on out, and the media is out there saying, oh, he's going to cut this, he's going to cut that, he's going to cut this, he's going to cut that. He's cutting all these things for the people. And to pick just one example, one of the big lies coming out of the media is that the Meals on Wheels program is going to be cut completely. And contrary to those news reports, President Trump is not eliminating funding for Meals on Wheels. He's not even cutting it. In fact, it's not even mentioned in the budget outline at all. And Meals on Wheels themselves have issued a statement saying it's not true. It's just not true at all. They're just trying to make things up to make you distrust and hate Donald Trump. And given those statements by Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein, it does look like they're going to try some kind of a coup d'etat here. And if anybody from the Trump administration is monitoring this show, you got to send him a message. He's got to stop playing defense. He's got to go on the offense. He's got to regain the initiative, or they're going to succeed in getting him out. Obviously, Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein know something is going on. They're still pushing this Trump is a Russian patsy, and they may just try and invoke the 25th Amendment saying, well, we can't trust him. We're not sure. Even though the investigation has found nothing at all linking Trump to Russia, we dare not take the chance that he's a Moscow candidate. All the time, of course, ignoring all the millions of dollars from Russian sources that flowed into the Clinton Charitable Foundation and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Why isn't anybody asking if the Clintons were Russian spies? It's a hatchet job against the elected President of the United States of America. And I do not agree with everything Donald Trump is doing. In many ways, I'm very disappointed with him. But he is the elected President of the United States of America, and under the rules of our country, that's just the done deal until the next election. Now, getting into the war zones, We're getting a report now from the southfront.org. The moderate opposition, you know, the good terrorists that are supported with your tax dollars, have now officially formally united with Al-Qaeda to launch an attack in Hama. Remember when Obama was out there saying, well, there's ISIS and Al-Qaeda and you should be afraid of them, and then there's the moderate terrorists that we're going to help and support and give weapons to. And somehow those weapons given to the moderate terrorists always wound up in the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Looks like they were buddy-buddy all along here. Now, Bashar al-Assad is out there saying the so-called white helmets, they are Al-Qaeda. That's proven. And still the Western corporate media treats them as some kind of humanitarian hero. They're a propaganda device, is what they are. Now, as you know, there is a building crisis in Syria where Israeli warplanes flew into Syria and bombed Syrian forces in order to protect ISIS. And the Syrians shot back, and Israel got really upset. How dare you shoot at our warplanes who are bombing your country? What's wrong with you? That's not supposed to happen. And it kicked up a bit of a stink here, to where finally Russia came on back and said, your freedom to operate over Syria is over. And to punctuate it, Russia launched a cruise missile attack against those terrorists Israel was trying to protect. Well, now Netanyahu is saying, we're going to go on bombing Syria whenever we want. And according to the Jerusalem Post, Netanyahu is now saying that no, he has not received a message from Vladimir Putin that he's not supposed to go into Syria any longer. That is a very, very dangerous situation. If Israel goes into Syria again with their warplanes, Russia may respond. That opens up the door for all these war hawks who want a war with Russia and think it's really good. And by the way, over the next commercial break, I'm going to put up a document on my website. It's the official enlistment form for the military services, and I want you to download it and print out a whole bunch of copies. And from now on, any time that you see anybody saying, well, we really should go into Syria, or we should go back into Libya, or we should do this, just whip one of those out and say, here, sign up. I know where the military recruiting offices are. You just sign your name on that. I'd be happy to drop it off on my way home. Because I am sick and tired of people demanding everyone else go over to these war zones to be killed and crippled, but they've always got a reason to stay here at home. Let's put them on the spot. Let's see you walk your talk. You really think that there should be a war against Bashar al-Assad? Why are you not on the front lines then? Now, we had a campaign doing that a few years ago, more than a few years ago, back during Iraq. And it was actually so successful that people who had these enlistment forms were being blocked from going in to rallies in favor of the war. And the excuse the goon squad used was, well, you're going to make those who want to go fight in the war but can't feel bad. Therefore, we're not going to let you in. That's how ridiculous that was here. Now, apparently the battle for Mosul is entering its final stage, which sounds really good until you try and figure out what the American motive is for being there. There are huge civilian casualties, but it's no big deal. It's just not worth talking about, the civilian casualties. God, you people are such sissies and bleeding hearts worrying about civilian casualties. Now, as of the 26th of this month, the Saudi-led and U.S.-supported war in Yemen will turn 2. And how we got in that mess is really very simple. The U.S. went into Yemen. They had a regime change. The people of Yemen did not like their new U.S. puppet rulers and tried to kick them out. And the current war is the U.S. and Saudi Arabia going back in and saying to the people of Yemen, you will accept foreign puppet rule or we will starve you to death. And right now, Yemen, which is already a very, very poor country, they have massive famine there. The United States government is starving the civilian population of Yemen into surrendering to foreign puppet rule. So the next time somebody comes on out and says Russian aggression or Chinese aggression, you point them at this and say, who's the aggressor right now? Who is really the aggressor in all of these conflicts we've seen for the last 15 years? Now, apparently Libya is fighting back against their foreign puppet rulers. Of course, what the corporate media is saying, ISIS is regrouping in Libya. It's a powder keg. We're going to have to invade Libya again and put in a new foreign puppet government. Here a war, there a war, everywhere a war, E-I-E-I-O here. Now, a little bit of propaganda that's ramping on up. Israel is claiming that the latest arms convoy that they bombed in Syria, which led to this kerfuffle with Putin, contained North Korean missiles, all, of course, sourced with anonymous people not authorized to talk about it. How you would tell it's an advanced North Korean missile after you've bombed it into rubble, a little bit of a mystery. But Israeli media is trying to sell the idea that North Korea is behind all of this militarism in Syria. If those North Koreans would just mind their own business, Assad would have been gone long ago. Frankly, I'm not buying it one tiny bit. And by the way, let's be very honest. If Israel and the United States are sending in arms to the terrorists inside Syria, why can't North Korea send in weapons as well? Where did this double standard come from, where America is allowed to ship weapons all over the planet, but nobody else is? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, this is one of the areas where obviously I do not agree with the Trump administration. The United States is boycotting the United Nations Human Rights Council session, focusing on Israel's human rights violations against the Palestinians, claiming that the United Nations is a bunch of Jew-hating anti-Semites who want Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens. Now, obviously, for anybody who's actually studied what's going on over there, it is a terrible, terrible situation being imposed on those people of Palestine by the Israelis. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories, Michael Link, has described the Israeli occupation as the most malignant in the world. And basically says Israel is just imposing alien rule over 5 million people against their wishes, which inevitably leads to the repression of rights, the erosion of the rule of law, the abrogation of international commitments, and the imposition of deeply discriminatory practices. Boy, that sounds like apartheid to me. Now, Israel may be getting very, very tired of all this talk about apartheid, and they may be getting ready to do something very nasty about it, because we're seeing a story that came out of the Daily Star that Israel is now preparing for a new war on Gaza and Lebanon. They still want that Litani River. So they're going to get all the weapons loaded and all the weapons warmed up, and then some Israeli stooge inside Gaza will fire a bottle rocket into an empty lot on Israel's side of the fence, causing no damage, harming nobody, and Israel will go on in, as they do every 2 to 3 years, and flatten Gaza. And say, they made us do it, Mommy. They're the bad people. Boy, oh boy. Sweden apparently has decided to reactivate their Cold War bunkers over fears of Russian invasion. Back during the Cold War, a lot of people made a lot of money building bunkers for civilians, or for at least for the government, and they were all stocked with all kinds of emergency food and everything. And I remember when I was back in the 1970s, there was a shopping mall near our home that had a civil defense fallout shelter in the basement, and I was very curious about it. And one day I saw the doors were open, and so I just walked on in, and I found a work crew just throwing everything out because it had all been allowed to rot. It was just a joke, this idea that we had these civil defense shelters all over America where we could go and survive a nuclear war. There wasn't anything there that you could use. It had all rotted away years before it wasn't being replaced. And of course, this idea that Russia is going to invade either Europe or the United States is ludicrous. Look at the EU and the US. On the verge of bankruptcy, crippled by corruption and open borders, why would Putin want to take on those problems? He wouldn't. He's just going to sit back and let the European Union and the United States collapse on their own. We'll be right back after station identification.